Good morning and welcome to Lead with Confidence Fundamentals for First Time Managers. Today we are talking redemption and we have Simon Fenech on the line. Good morning, Simon. How are you going?
Good morning, Sam. How are you? I'm going well.
Good to hear. Now, I haven't actually ever asked you this question, but do you have a Jeff in your family?
No, but I wish I had. I might not have ended up in prison, right? Because if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me, I would have ended up quite rich, I think.
It was in the back of my mind. I was like, kickboxing, boxing, it's in the bloodline.
Yeah.
Perhaps there actually is a connection there. So I thought, yeah, I better ask the question. I'm not quite sure. Fantastic. All right. So, guys, I'm going to share my screens for a little bit. We're just going to do a little bit of an intro about what we're going to talk about for the next hour. And then I'm going to pull it down and we're just going to have a really candid discussion. Having spoken to Simon before, he is an open book. He has a wonderful story to tell. He's happy to take questions. So feel free to ask the questions along the way. He's perfectly fine with that. And as I said, I really want you to challenge your thinking as we go through the next hour, because growth only happens when we really get down in there into the weeds of our subconscious and we start to think about what our belief systems are. And I want you to challenge what you perhaps have always thought or what you think because someone else has given you a certain belief system. What you have is a human here who has been down to the depths, but has redeemed himself and has now dedicated his life to helping others and to making sure that they don't go down that path. And it's a beautiful story. So let's get into it, shall we, Simon?
Well, thanks for the introduction, Sam.
Pleasure. I'm going to give you a better one in a second.
Right.
All right. So redemption is our is the topic we're talking about. Now, the company that I really want to give a plug to is the one that Simon now works for, and it is called Fruit to Work. And I think, Simon, based on, talking to you, would you say you almost owe maybe not your whole life, but your future and the fact that you've now got hope and that you've got purpose and that you're on the right path? Do you think that Fruit to Work played an enormous part in that?
I would actually go as far as saying that a little business, a social enterprise that delivers fruit and milk, uh, definitely changed my life, if not saved my life.
So good. Love it. Love it. Well, let's get into it. So you all know me. You've been on these webinars before, director of Kinetik Global, doing all sorts of wonderful things, but I love doing these webinars. And on this particular occasion, it's a webinar with a beautiful message, but it's also an opportunity to promote a business that's doing something amazing in our community, which is what our Kinetik Impact project is all about. And so if at the end you think, wow, that's amazing, and our workplace could really do with our bread and our milk and certain staples delivered to the office through these guys, then there's contact details at the end that you can reach out to. But Simon, you're a colorful man. You have done lots in your life. As we've said, you're the general manager right now at Fruit to Work, but former Australian kickboxing champion for Australia and Asia Pacific. You've been to jail for crime and methamphetamine addiction to support that addiction. You've been a finalist in the Social Enterprise Champion of the Year award. And then you were actually named one of the 100 most inspiring Australians in the Qantas Travel Insider magazine. Now, not too many people can say that they've had a roller coaster, book like that written about them.
Yeah, look, I want to make one thing clear because under no circumstance I want to glorify my past. My past or my life is not a life I would have chosen for myself. It is not what I wanted for myself. And I'm very lucky to be here today. As when I get in and tell you my story, you will realise. So I'm ever so grateful that I am, and I'm grateful to be given the opportunity to be here, present, to speak to you guys today, and do the work that I'm doing, helping other people change their lives.
So good. So well said. And that's the beautiful thing that I found about you, Simon. You're really humble. At the same time, you're like, yes, I happen to have something that's, very interesting about my lifestyle, but that's not the element I'm trying to highlight here. And that's not the purpose of why I do what I do. And so it's more about we learn from that. So we never close the book on it. We learn from that, but that's not what I want people to focus on. It's now, what are we going to do to make a difference going forward?
Yeah. And I'd like to tell you how I got there, because I think it's really important that the people realise, people aren't born criminals. You can make mistakes. You do make mistakes, but it's what you do with those mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Um,
I'll show one slide and then I'm going to pull it down, and then I want to hear all that story. Is that
sure.
okay?
Go for it.
All right. So, guys, I just like to always start with a definition quote to make sure we're all on the same page. Now, there's a couple of different quotes around redemption, but in this case, I've pulled this one out: the action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil ways. Now, I picked that out because I thought, well, that's probably nice and appropriate. But as I said to you before I even hit record, and then again when I did start, as you listen, I want you to challenge your thinking and consider some of the following questions. So I want you to, metacognition is thinking about your thinking. I want you to think what's coming up for you as you listen to Simon's story. He's going to tell you, he's going to paint the pictures. Many of us see the start and we see the end, and then we make judgments in between. And we've got bias and we've got all sorts. But I really want you to now read the pages in between that Simon said. I didn't pick this. If I could rewrite my time again, it wouldn't have been the script I wrote. I want you to think about, well, how does it sit against your values? Because your values drive your behavior. I want you to think about, how do you feel about a second chance? Some people are very much no, one and done. Others are like, yeah, I think everybody deserves a right at a second chance. Think about what bias are at play when you're thinking. Have you perhaps been one of the victims of crime, and therefore you have a bias around that, because it's like, well, I've been the terrified human on the other end of that, and so I don't have much to give. How might all this be influencing my leadership style? Each of you on the line is a leader. So just think about how your thought process might be influencing how you make decisions, how you connect with people, how you appoint people. And then, would I hire someone who presented with a similar life story? Many of us have worked for organizations where a police check is a mandatory requirement. I have worked for organizations where it's a mandatory requirement, but then the finer details were looked into. And if it was a mere little indiscretion that happened when someone was really young, it might be that's okay. Other organizations are just, no, it's a nil write-off once the police record brings something up. So I want you to think about those things, because this isn't just about coming to tell a story. I wanted to do this because I genuinely want to expand people's minds to things. You may not change your thinking at all after this, but if we can be telling a story, or we can be giving you something where you go, actually, that was an hour well spent, because I don't think about the world like that, or I did have a bias around this, then that's all we can ask. So, Simon, I am going to pull the screen down, because I don't want you to be a little tiny thumbnail at the end of this. I want to give you full screen. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to hand it over to you. So please do tell us, how did you get to this point? What's your message that you want to share?
So, again, I will say, not a life I would have chosen for myself. I considered myself to be a family man. I considered myself to be lucky. I grew up with great parents. Never in a million years would I have thought that I could have been addicted to drugs, or that I would ever have ended up in jail. In 2008, I lived in a beautiful double-story home, a 50-square home. I was married with two children. I drove a Mercedes Benz and I rode a Harley Davidson. I had a great paying job. I was working for Aldi supermarkets, driving their B doubles all over the state. And everything in my life I had touched had turned to gold. So, I really had a great upbringing. I had nothing to complain about. I was fit as a fiddle. I was a 2 times Australian kickboxing champion, a South Australian and East Coast kickboxing champion, and a South Pacific kickboxing champion. And one day, whilst I was at work, I was struck in the back with a forklift, damaging my lower spine. So I went from being fit as a fiddle to being pretty much bedridden. I could stand, I could sit, I could walk, but I can only do things for a short period of time. I definitely could not work, and I was in constant pain 24 hours a day. If anyone has been in chronic pain, you will understand that that pain never leaves you. You feel it in your sleep. You feel it when you stand up. It just doesn't go away. That really threw me for a six, because really relying on my fitness to not being able to do much really got to my mental health. Now, the doctors were fantastic at prescribing all these different medications, muscle relaxants, nerve relaxants, sleeping tablets, painkillers, even antidepressants. But nothing really worked. And we tried all numerous types of therapy, chiropractic, physiotherapy, spinal therapy. Again, nothing really worked. This went on for about 12 months, and there was no escape. In actual fact, depression really started to set in, because I would watch my family go to school and go to work, and I would be stuck at home in the bedroom downstairs. I could not even make it upstairs to the marital bedroom. Um, my friends would ring me up from kickboxing and say, "Come on, I'm going to pick you up, and we're going to go watch the fights on Friday night." I was not interested. My friends would would ring me up and say, "I'm going to pop over for a coffee." I would say, "Don't bother." The guys I used to go riding with would ring me and say, "We're going out for a ride on the weekend. Let's go. Come with us." I couldn't even put my foot over the back of the bike. So I started shutting myself off from the world, and I didn't want to hear and see anybody that I knew. Um, I would try and sleep for most of the day, and even that was scattered and hazy. One day, out of the blue, about 12 months down the track, there was knocking at my door, and I was peeking through the curtain, and it was an acquaintance of mine, and he was a persistent. He kept knocking and knocking until I opened the door. Um, so I let him in, and he, heard that I wasn't in a good way. And as soon as he took one look, what he heard was right. Uh, he was quite surprised in how backwards I had gone in such a short period of time. He thought he would bring me something to make me feel a little bit better, um, and it was the drug ice. Now, I had heard about ice previously. I had nothing to do with recreational drugs, but I had heard about ice. Ice was fairly new on the market. There wasn't a lot of knowledge about it, and he told me that it would make me feel better. Now, I had always imagined a drug that was dangerous, or a drug that you could get addicted to, that would come in a syringe, and you would put that into your bloodstream. But this dangerous drug was only something that you inhaled, right? So it did not seem too dangerous to me. And I watched him drop a small crystal type substance into a glass pipe, put a cigarette lighter underneath it, melt it, and inhale the fumes. And that was the drug ice. It did not look scary, it did not look dangerous, and it definitely did not look addictive. So I said, "Okay, I'll give it a crack." And he did the whole process for me. He passed me the pipe and he said, "Inhale this." And I can tell you, from the very first time I inhaled that smoke, I knew I was in trouble. From the very first time I used ice, I knew I was addicted, because I wanted more of that feeling. I'm a Maltese man, so I'm pretty hairy, and every hair from the tip of my toes to the back of my neck stood up. All of a sudden, the pain had gone away. My mind was running 100 miles an hour, and so was my mouth. And all of a sudden, my mind was no longer a prisoner of my body. Right then, I knew I was in trouble. because I wanted more of that feeling. That feeling lasted, that one inhale of smoke lasted for about 2 days. That feeling lasted for 2 days. No sleep, up for 2 days. And then it ran out, just like a car runs out of petrol. And when it ran out, I felt 10 times worse than I had felt before. Because the ice had given me energy, it had masked my pain. I had done more than I had done for a long period of time. And when that ice had ran out, I come down twice as hard as and felt 10 times worse than I ever had. The doctor's medications were not cutting it. And me thinking I knew it all, came up with this great idea that I would start self-medicating on $100 worth of ice a day, because it was a quick fix. And that's where
Yeah.
it started. So the habit
Apart from apart from it made you feel better, what was your mobility like?
my mobility improved about 60%. And the reason for that is it actually masked the pain, right? When I came down and the drug ran out, the pain was there tenfold.
Yeah.
So I'm not condoning it as pain relief. I'm not condoning the drug at all. I can just explain to you how it had affected me. What was linked to the drug comes in the rest of my story, because.
So I guess without then condoning it, could we bring it back to the fact that how important mindset is then? What that kind of did was blocked the thought pattern of the pain. There was still a physical injury, so that's probably the other 40%. But it's the mindset of I'm injured, I can't do this. Perhaps that blocked that thought process, and so therefore that became that 60% mobility.
There's a real simple terminology to ice use that a guy I once knew told me, and you are a rooster one day and a feather duster the next. That is the false sense of security of ice. It makes you feel invincible at the time, until it runs out, and then you are useless. And that's how people become so highly addicted to methamphetamine. What happens is they will use it recreational on a Friday, still awake on a Saturday. On a Sunday, they will have a little bit more, so they can go to work on Monday. Right? Then it becomes Monday use, Tuesday use, just so they can keep going. And getting back to my story, from $100 a day, my ice use went to $200 a day, to $300, to $400, to $500, and in the end, I was using over $1,000 worth of ice a day.
And were you working at this point?
I was on work cover, with my bank, and to support that habit, to come up with that sort of money. In the drug world, you either deal or you steal to survive and to feed your habit. I never made much of a thief, so I started dealing drugs. Whilst dealing drugs, I met a lot of unsavory characters. I was invited to a world I had never known, and whilst using drugs, I was shot in the thigh, and I was stabbed 3 times in the back of the neck by 3 guys trying to stand over me for money and drugs. Whilst using drugs, my father died. 12 months later, my brother died. 3 months after that, my mother died. And 12 months after that, my baby daughter died. So, in a world of pain and then all this death, puts you in a bigger world of pain. The year my daughter died, I tried taking my own life 5 times. They were not suicide attempts. My last suicide attempt was a loaded shotgun in my mouth. and how I stand here before you today and tell you this story, I will never know. There is no coming back from that, right? But somehow, the bullet, one of the bullets that I had put in that gun was a blank, and the projectile fired. It fired into the back of my mouth and blew the back of my mouth out. I had blood coming out of my nose and my ears, but I survived.
Wow, what a story. It obviously wasn't your time. And guys, for all of you on the line, I am mental health certified. So if you need to talk to me after this, please feel free to. Like this is some pretty heavy stuff and some raw stuff. And it's not even in Queensland, it's not even 11 a.m. yet. But the reality is it's real and it's raw. And we can sit in our ivory towers and pretend it doesn't happen, but what we do have is a real human here who's being honest, and thank goodness that you are here to tell the story, Simon, and I'm so sorry to hear about all that tragedy and the death of a child. I couldn't even imagine as a mother myself. So well done for being strong enough to come through, but not only come through, you're then able to continue on and to help other people.
Thanks. The death of my daughter was the last resort for me, and trying to come back from that was really difficult. Before I knew it, I was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Numerous police raids, and each time when the police arrived, they would find drugs. I was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Now, for me, jail was where I deserved to be. I have no qualms about going to jail. I was doing the wrong thing. I needed to be punished for that. But jail was an eye-opener. It was not what I expected. I actually don't know what I expected. But being in a 3 by 2 meter cell and being fed through a slot in the door in a little plastic container, and just as you're about to start eating your dinner, your cellmate then less than a meter away decides to go to the toilet. So if that wasn't an eye opener, if that wasn't an awakening, not being able to see or touch your children, it was tough. I was sentenced to 12 months in prison, and I used that time to rehabilitate myself. Now, there are plenty of drugs in prison, legal and illegal. I used prison as an opportunity to gain some skills and to rehabilitate myself. I completed as many programs and courses as I could get into whilst I was away. Because when I came home, I wanted to get my life back. But that was not as easy as I had anticipated. So when I came home from prison, I had nowhere to live. All my family were deceased apart from my brother. My brother was a justice of the peace. He had helped me whilst I was in prison. He had helped me with my court and helped pay for solicitors, but he made some strict boundaries that I could not live with him when I came home because he had his own family and his own problems. So the jail had organised a boarding house for me for when I came home. And I thought in my head, finally, at least I've got a roof over my head, I can start my life. But the boarding house the jail had sent me to was a drug den. When we turned up at this house, because my brother picked me up from the train station, there was a lounge suite in the middle of the lawn, the front grass. There was a car in the driveway with smashed windows and no number plates. And I knocked on the door, and this lady had come to the door, and she was clearly intoxicated on heroin. There was track marks all up and down her arms. This is where I was supposed to start my new life when I came home from prison. And as she walks me down the hallway, she's slurring her words and undoing these padlocks on the door, and tells me that my room smells like urine because the guy in the room next to me urinates on the wall and it goes into my carpet. And sure enough, when she opened that door, the room stunk like a male urinal in a public park. It was disgusting. There were syringes, used syringes on the carpet, and my bed had a big dirty brown blood patch in the middle of it. And that's where I was supposed to start my new life when I came home from prison. I
Wow.
wasn't released a free man either. I still had a corrections order to fulfill. So after my 12 months imprisonment, I had an 18-month corrections order, which meant I still had to do a mental health program, a drug and alcohol program, a men's behaviour change program, 380 hours community work, and see my caseworker once a week. I had to do all of that as well as try and seek some employment because you can't survive on Centrelink. That boarding house was $200 a week, and Centrelink was $520 a fortnight. So I had to try and survive off $60 a week. To be totally honest, I could not even stay in that boarding house for one night, and I begged my brother to get me out of there and get me somewhere different. And he put me up in a hotel for a few nights, and a few nights later we found a better boarding house, a drug-free boarding house, so I could start my life over again. It had bedding on it. All I needed was a job, and trying to get a job with all those correction requirements was next to impossible. Trying to get a job with criminal history was next to impossible. I could not even get a job washing dishes. And this went on for about 6 months. And, 6 months down the track, I've just come out of prison. I'm determined. I want to change my life. I want to get my kids back in my life, but it's next to impossible for me. I was surviving off $60 a week. I was hungry and I was broke. I was going to church groups for food parcels, and every job I applied for, I just would never hear back. So I went to see my caseworker at corrections one morning and said, "Look, I can't do this anymore. I think I'm better off back in jail or doing what I used to do because at least I could survive dealing drugs. I can't survive like this on the streets." And this is where the turning point in the story is, because it's all doom and gloom up until now. She reaches into the trash can and she pulls out a flyer, and it was from Fruit to Work. The flyer says, we are seeking a delivery driver, and if you've got criminal history, you are encouraged to apply. That all sounded it all sounded a bit too good to be true. So I asked her to make a phone call for me and just to see if it was real, because when you lived in the world that I lived in, trust wasn't very high. Anyway, she
Did you
makes a
have to
phone
do a
call.
police check? Did you have to do a police check just to qualify in this time?
I did actually. Believe it or not, Fruit to Work still does police checks, and I'll explain to you a little bit on why. But
Yep.
I sat in the interview. I told the lady my story, and she said, "You are a perfect candidate for the opportunity." Um, it was starting at 3:30 in the morning. It was on the other side of town. It was 2 days a week, and I was driving a bright yellow van. But it was a job. I was given a high-vis uniform. I was given keys to a van. I was given keys to buildings around Melbourne CBD, and I would go and I'd be picking and packing fruit and delivering it to customers, and people were happy to see me, and I was happy to see them. I did not feel like a drug addict anymore. I did not feel like I had just left prison. That chance of employment was life changing. The discussion was different. So I got to talk about fishing, and I got to talk about what people did on the weekend. It was I started to change my mindset and my routine. Fruit to Work was a new business, and it was growing rapidly. So within a short period of time, I was promoted to a team leader. 12 months after that, I was promoted to the operations manager. And I did the operations manager role for about 4.5 years. The business grew from $180,000 a year to this year. We closed the books at just under $9 million.
Wow, good job.
So, back then it was two people. This year we've got 135 people. As the business grew, I grew with the business. Today, I'm the National General Manager of Fruit to Work. Today, I'm one of the directors. Today, if you forget the titles, today I'm a loving partner, and we've just built a brand new house. But more importantly, I have full custody of my youngest son. His mum is still living that lifestyle. Today, my 10-year-old boy calls me his hero, and he calls me the best dad in the world. I'm not the best dad in the world, but I'm the best dad in the world because somebody gave me a chance. If it wasn't for Fruit to Work and it wasn't for the opportunity, I do not know where I would be. That chance, that employment opportunity was life changing. A business, a social enterprise that delivers fruit, milk, and pantry items changes people's lives because it puts the money back in the community, creating meaningful transitional employment for people just like me. And I look like the jailhead. I look like somebody that has come out of the system. I can assure you, we have many people that work with us who don't look like me, who are your everyday Joe that you will pass in the street and not think for 1 minute in the world that they have been to prison.
Mm.
Whilst I spent time in prison, I met a lot of people. 40% of people, I believe, in prison are there because they made some stupid choices or some bad mistakes. The other 40% have grown up in the wrong home. If you listen to their upbringing, they were destined for jail just from what they have seen as children. And then the other 20% are just bad people and they should never come home.
Mm.
Uh,
Those stats you said them when I first met you, and they really struck a chord with me. And you kind of get that in the workplace too, don't you? It's the 80-20 rule. You know, there's 20% there that probably shouldn't be there, but the other 80% we can work with. And Jess has put a comment and it says this embodies the concept of hate the behavior but love the person. And I think that's beautiful, Jess. I think that's a really nice thing.
Thanks, Jess.
That at the end of the day, people make silly choices, and every single one of us could probably identify with a period of time where we went, oh, that was stupid. And I always remember traveling the world and being in Egypt, and just to get a student card, pretend student card, handing some random person my passport, and then my passport went missing for hours. And it's like, gosh only knows, that was a dumb thing. And had my kids done that, I would have been really furious at them. But we have all done silly things to varying degrees. I think that's part of life and living. And certainly when I look back on my time, it wasn't when things went great that I have the funniest stories. It was when, oh no, I was in a dorm in Madrid, and someone pulled out a machete, and it was like, oh my goodness, like we just have stories. It is part of living.
Yeah, I have only got myself to blame for the choices I have made, and I totally wear that. But being given the opportunity to try and redeem myself um, was brilliant. It saved my life. Not only did it save my life, but it gave me the opportunity to be a role model to my children, to be a parent to my children, because I certainly was not that before. That's how much a second chance means to people, not to everybody. You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. But
Mm.
I do believe that if people want a second chance, they should be given one. But they have to earn that as well. Yeah.
Mm. Talk to us about what do Fruit to Work do as well. Like, you've spoken to us about
Yeah.
what the system did when you came out,
Mhm.
you had to do certain things, but I know that you guys are very much about rehabilitation and about making sure nobody reoffends. So what kind of programs are you doing internally?
So I'm going to brag about a stat that we are really, really proud of. That in nearly in 8.5 years of operation, not one person that has joined the Fruit to Work program has gone back to prison.
Amazing.
In Australia today, on average, 1 in 2 people that are released from prison will go back within 2 years. At Fruit to Work, nobody has gone back to prison. right? So,
Wow.
so it's something that we can brag about. It's unheard of even throughout the world.
Amazing. It's got a love heart from Mandy, by the way.
I've
She's
seen that.
like, good job. So what did you say? 1 in 2 will
Well,
go
one in
back to
two
prison
will go back within 2 years.
within two
Right?
years. 50% will reoffend.
So we've
Okay.
had nobody go back to jail in the whole time of its operation. And
Amazing.
why is that the case? We believe it's a number of things. 95% of the organisation has lived experience of the justice system. So we understand what people are going through because we have been through it ourselves. There is no judgment here. There is no stigma. I will make it very clear that we do not employ sex offenders. We do not employ anyone that has been convicted of any child-related crimes. Right? We don't only offer employment. We offer a lot of wraparound services. We have our own in-house forensic psychologist. We have co-facilitated or designed a program with her called Building a Better You, which is 24 modules dealing with loss, worry, addiction, rejection. So we cover those modules in full. We have a budgeting program which help people with their finances. If somebody falls off the wagon and put their hand up to say, "Hey, I use drugs on the weekend," we will help them through the process. If we test somebody and they come up with drugs in the system, that is a different conversation. We base our employment on honesty and integrity. So we still do crim checks on our team, but at the time of interview, um, you know, we ask people what their struggles are, where they have fallen down, what their crimes were, and what their future looks like. And everybody that joins us through to work knows that it's a transitional employment opportunity. So ideally, they will come on board, stay between 12 or 6 and 12 months. And if they're not transitioned internally, we transition them externally to full-time employment. But in that course of transition, the first week is, how have you gone getting back into the workforce? A lot of people that come to us still have parole requirements or corrections orders. So we design the roster around those requirements to ensure that they succeed. Um, we, uh, we will review that in a month's time to see how they're going and also start to talk about what their life looks like when they leave through to work, what they want to do. Do they want to drive trucks? Do they want to go back and finish their hairdressing apprenticeship? And over the next 3 months, it is how are they going to get there? Do they need to go for driving lessons to get the truck license? Do they need to attend night school to go back and finish their apprenticeship? But we do whatever it takes to ensure that the candidates succeed, and we keep in contact with them after they transition out.
Brilliant. So they're coming to you straight out from serving time. This is never a long-term career, or sometimes it is a long-term career, but there's always a plan, and it's all about getting you back and functioning in society, giving you the tools that you need, coming from a supportive, non-judgmental environment for those who understand the system, how it works, have been there, done that, can relate, and want the best for you.
Correct. And it's not about hiding who you are. It's not about being. It's not about being proud of who you were. It's about being proud of who you are today.
Yeah,
And
I
that's where
love
the
that.
redemption part comes in.
Love it.
Our logo is fruit to work with a set of handcuffs around it. And our boxes are all branded like that. And often guys will be in a lift in the CBD, and people say, well, what does the handcuffs mean? And they'll have a conversation about who we are and what we do. And before they leave that lift, they're asking how they can sign up to start buying fruit and milk from our business
Yeah.
because we're giving back to the community.
So good. Now, Jess, you briefly took your camera off. Was there a question you wanted to ask?
No, not necessarily. I was just intrigued and engaged in the story and the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty special. And look, as I said, guys, you know, it's some heavy stuff. I am mental health first aid trained, so I will call each of you after this and, you know, just do my social responsibility thing. But I think it's really, and just you're in HR, you know, you know this stuff. I think it's really important to always just check in about our belief systems, or you know, what we think every now and then. And if we don't audit that, and if we don't think about these things, we'll always just keep believing what we've always believed. And that doesn't really bring the world together. You know, I'm a big believer that instead of attacking what we don't understand, get curious about it and start asking questions. And if we did that around religion and we did that around all sorts of things, we'd be in a much better world. Because instead of me being judgmental or hating on something that I didn't understand or didn't agree with, I would just be curious to ask the question. And it doesn't mean I have to agree. It doesn't mean that I have to believe it or go down that path, but at least I became curious, because that's what everybody, I think, deserves, the right for somebody to actually ask the question rather than just make judgment and shut them off. Beautiful. All right, Simon, is there anything you would like to say before we do some sort of closing slides?
Yeah, all I'd like to add is we help people impacted by the justice system. What you know, that can really vary. I've got a young woman that works for me who started with us when she was 19 years old. Her mother and father have both been through the system. Her three siblings have all been through the system. She had not gone to school. She joined us because she wanted to do something different. So the opportunities we create, um, um, you know, really vary for all sorts of people who just want a chance at life. Right. Again, I will say that my life is not pretty. It is not one that I would have chosen for myself. But you know, I am on this side of the fence, and I am able to help other people through their struggles and help change their lives. And my true north is watching parents reconnect with their children. That is my thing. I love these kids that you know were waiting for their parents to come home at Christmas time because they were locked up, or waiting for a present and their parents were spending money on drugs. Now their parents are home and they are being parents. That is what I love.
Love it. So good. Isn't it funny how often we all have the same kind of end goal, and that's to, you know, to help people and to create better lives, and we all just come at it from a different space. And you know, it takes all sorts to make the world right. And I couldn't do what you do because I couldn't connect on a level that you can connect. So it's really important that you do what you do, and that I do what I do, coming from my life story and my history, and that we move towards, you know, a better tomorrow, and a tomorrow where there is a lot more connection, there is a lot more understanding, there is a lot more curiosity, because I think that, you know, we certainly have a lot of hate in the world, we certainly have a lot of feud and a lot of conflict. And if we flipped it around, and well, one of the big things that stood out for me, Simon, a lot of your programs, before you got to the budgetary ones, but a lot of your programs was mindset. And I'm such a huge believer, you know, my kids, they're not going to need Pythagoras' theorem unless they go down that path. But they are human with the same fundamental functionings that every single one of us on here have. And learning how to work the mindset, learning how to create mental toughness, you know, social pressures, all sorts of things. You know, if I can be building that in my children, so that, you know, when the day comes that someone might be knocking on their door with something that's tempting, you know, they've got tools to kind of go, do I want to do this, do I not want to do this? I think
Totally
it's
agree.
amazing. Well done. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to have a couple of parting slides. All right, so I wrote this before we even spoke, but let me know if anything has changed. Key message: connection, compassion, kindness. Would you say that they would be the three things that you would leave everyone with, and would you add anything else?
Kindness just really jumps out there for me. Nobody knows what somebody is going through, and it costs nothing to be kind.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And I love the t-shirts that just have kindness across the front. And apart from that, if you are the kind of person who's kind, you're going to get it back tenfold.
Get it back.
So, life's all about what you give more so than what you get. But you will find that you'll get a lot more just by being kind. Now, I took this from when you gave me a bio. Addiction can be conquered with the right support systems around you, and I think that that's something that I think everybody's got some form of addiction. If
Yeah.
it's social media, if it's alcohol, if it's the pokies, gambling, drugs, whatever else,
Food.
What's that? Food? Yeah,
Food.
absolutely. Absolutely food. And, I'll often watch people substitute one addiction for another addiction. And it's not that they've necessarily they might have cured one addiction, but the drugs just became the alcohol, or the alcohol just became the
Right.
gambling, or whatever. But I thought it was a really nice message to kind of go with the right support systems, because often we write people off, particularly when it was, you gave me a headache when you did that, and now you've just jumped over here, same old story, or apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or, I'm sure you've heard so many sayings like that over the years. But with the right support systems, we can not only give people a second chance, but we can conquer addictions, and we can make a difference. All right. Does anyone want to ask any questions? I know that Jess, you already sort of made comment. Yeah, Jess, come on in.
I will jump in and ask a super quick question. When is Fruit to Work coming to Sydney?
We had planned for it to come next year. We've just opened up in Queensland. We've opened up another 2 in Victoria. I think by late next year we will be in Sydney.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Looking forward to it.
Get on their newsletter list, Jess. Jess just happens to be an HR Simon, so
Right.
decision maker right there for you.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Now, Brad had to jump off, and so did a couple of others. So, Simon, thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate just your candidness. And, as you can see, we help first-time managers. Our people have burnout. Our people are, doing it tough. We've sat in the trenches with people who, have they don't get as much money invested into them as corporate executives. Now, this is by no means anywhere near the kind of stuff that you're doing, but we're just as passionate as you guys are around helping your people. And I think that it's people like you guys, people like us, who just love what they do. It doesn't really matter who you're helping, as long as you're passionate about who you are helping and what you do. So this is our one of our programs we've just launched. We're getting great feedback from it. It's doing amazing things. You've had a few people on the line today who are doing the program who rave about it. If anyone is interested, you can find out more from the QR code. Now, if you want to catch this recording, it's in our first time manager community. As I said, Simon, I'm happy to share it with you, and you're also welcome to carve it up so that you can spread the word from Fruit to Work. And we really appreciate you just taking the time to come and have a chat to us. Some have been online live. You've had someone who's a decision maker who said, yeah, come to Sydney, when are we going to do it? And it's just little things like that make a difference and do create opportunities. So we really appreciate you coming. And as I said, in what I found online was, if you are keen to get involved, email accounts@fruittowork.com.au was what I saw on the website. Otherwise, on the website, there's an inbuilt form. And the website is just there, where you can put an inquiry in and find out how you might be able to partner with Fruit to Work. Beautiful.
Thanks, Sam.
Pleasure. Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity to have the last word. How would you like to I guess, close us out from this hour?
For anyone who's going through a tough time in there, just never give up. That's the best bit of advice I can give. One day at a time, and you know, it may not seem like you can get through it, but you can get through anything.
Yeah, so good. I love that. And we are gregarious. We are pack herd community people. So lean on your networks, and together, absolutely, I believe that we can conquer the world. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Simon. We really appreciate it. Thank you to those people who came on live, and we will see you at our next webinar.
Thank you.
Cheers.